Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and this week I am so excited because we get to talk about episodes 1 and 2 of the new HBO hit. That's right, the adaptation of the 2018 Stephen King novel, The Outsider. So when I'm recording this is Friday the 17th. I believe it is, the 17th. And The Outsider premiered this past Sunday, and we don't have that much longer to go before episode 3. I have a lot of thoughts on The Outsider, but before I get there, I just want to be upfront. I'm going to spend quite some time reading some emails because I've received a lot of emails lately, and then reading some iTunes reviews. So if you came for The Outsider review, just, keep scrubbing ahead. I expect that this is going to be probably an hour-ish episode, and I would say that the first 20 minutes or so are going to be dedicated towards reading and answering listener email and some iTunes reviews. Just want to give you that heads up, and just in case that this isn't for you, you can bow out now. But anyone that has been sticking around for a while, thank you for coming back. New listeners who want to keep on listening, I think that you'll enjoy the Stephen King cast. So, all right, before we get any further, I want to start reading some listener email. Up first, we have Cosmo, who writes, "Hey, CR. I recently ended a 4-month reading dry spell by devouring The Outsider and The Institute back-to-back over the last couple weeks. Whew, I loved both of these novels very much. I think I slightly prefer The Institute over The Outsider, but your enthusiasm bias towards The Outsider is infectious and makes me waver with my preference. As has been my ritual for the last 2 years, upon completion of a King book, I listen to your corresponding analysis for decompression and food for thought. You picked up on a pattern in these two titles that I began to take note of too. The mashing of two seemingly distinct plots and a good old genre blend. Even though I might prefer The Institute just a bit more than The Outsider, the plot combining and genre hopping in the latter is done way more adeptly. And yeah, I would also love a whole novel about Tim Jameson and Dupree, South Carolina. Maybe even 5 or 6. That to me was the best part of the Institute. Another shared aspect that might become a new Kingism is the respective quartets covering up the bigger, more supernatural happenings and implications that took place in the climaxes of the stories in the name of preservation of the status quo and or the security of the surviving members. Spoiler alert, guys, for both books. The characters from The Outsider conspiring the reframing of the guilt off of Terry and placing the perpetration of an unknown outsider, and the characters of The Institute creating kidnapping stories. Any thoughts on this? I think with the last few years of King's output, we might be bearing witness to a new phase of King's works. Long days and pleasant nights, constant listener, Cosmo. Cosmo, that's a great and fantastic and insightful. I need to think about that a bit more, but to me that speaks of where Stephen King is. He has lived the life, and he has seen that in life you have to make compromises, and sometimes there is no true victory. It is just the status quo of compromise, which in of itself is a true horror. And then we have Jeff, who writes, "Fellow constant reader, my name is Jeff. I stumbled upon your podcast, and I must say you are an excellent podcaster and reviewer of King's works. Thank you for what you do." Thank you, Jeff, for the kind words. I was a little different growing up. As a kid, I was a perfect fit for books. However, my attention couldn't hold books. I grew up in the 80s, and although I loved to play pretend, I could much more easily focus on TV. Get Smart was my favorite show, and movies. But I started to love books after I was made to read The Outsiders. That's The Outsiders, plural, which to me could easily be a Stephen King story in a way. And in 1997, in 10th grade, I found myself working at a library. I had recently gotten into horror movies and had seen Kubrick's The Shining, so I grabbed Insomnia, the latest King book, in the small town library. I absolutely fell in love, and the rest is history. It is my favorite King book. Next is Salem's Lot, third is The Gunslinger. But that's it for now. I've only read the above plus Carrie, Firestarter, Cujo, Needful Things, Desperation, Green Mile, Misery, Pet Sematary. I have not read, though I own The Stand, The Tommyknockers, and The Dead Zone. Keep up the good work. Sincerely, Jeff. Jeff, thank you for writing in, and let me know how you feel once you read those books. James writes, "Hi, Stephen King Cast. I just realized I don't know your name and I can't find it on your sites, but I found the podcast on my iPhone and it's very good. You have great content, and I'm so sorry to hear about your dog and that roller coaster of emotions that you went through. Thank you so much. I can't imagine having to go through that with my own dog, but I'm glad the pup is okay now. I'm a new Stephen King reader. I finished It, The Outsider, and several short stories, including Children of the Corn, Elevation, Mile 81 so far. I am now starting Pet Sematary as I really want to read the book before seeing the new movie. Of all these books, I really loved It and The Outsider so far. I thought The Outsider was such an interesting take on a crime thriller. It was so black and white in the first half and well written. When the supernatural kicked in, it really took me on a great ride. And the way Ralph evolved, spoiler alert, guys, essentially from an atheist to agnostic and then finally a firm believer in the supernatural was very believable. As an agnostic myself, I appreciated that because evidence really is important when considering the consequences of believing in things you don't necessarily prove. I look forward to reading the Bill Hodges series as well. Holly was such a lovable character in The Outsider. I was quite underwhelmed with Elevation. It's a great concept, but I feel the ending was where the story really begins and I wanted more. So in a way, it was effective, but also disappointing. I wanted to make sure to mention how much I agree with you on The Haunting of Hill House. Mike Flanagan is quickly becoming a modern legend. I love every film so far, and Gerald's Game was quite incredible. I love the story and it was masterfully directed, even if a small concept. I agree it's not capable of truly showing off Flanagan's full potential because of the nature of the story and the isolated location making for a limited visual. The Haunting of Hill House was an incredible experience for me. I've never seen a series so cohesively written, with the most intricate of details carefully and thoughtfully placed. Not one line of dialogue in that series is unnecessary. And episode 5, The Funeral Parlor, was simply astonishing with long shots as well as the script itself. What a long episode of heavy dialogue in the first half, yet I couldn't take my eyes off the screen and never got bored. If you are looking for new content to discuss on your podcast, I thought I'd suggest maybe having an episode where you cater to new readers a bit. Talk about your favorite books to those looking for thrills without getting into spoiler territory. I'd love to hear you talk about some underrated stories and talk about why they are great and why you feel some deserve their own movie. You have great opinions and insight, and I love your perspective on his books as well as the genre. It's nice to know someone else watched The Haunting of Hill House and noticed the technical achievements as well as the well-written story and effective scare sequences. I look forward to more from you. Best wishes, James. James, thank you for writing in. Okay, I'm not going to give it away yet, but I am in the planning stages of a new phase of the Stephen King cast because since I completed the chronological order of publication mission statement that still opens up each of the episodes. You know, every episode has been dedicated to, little chunks of stuff here and there. Some cleanup episodes, some movies that I never got around to reviewing, some short stories I never really got around to reviewing, adaptations when they come out. Of course, the new books and stuff like when Stranger Things first came out because it was so Stephen King inspired. I decided to cover, the first season of Stranger Things, yada, yada, yada. But, Lock and Key, maybe be reviewing Lock and Key when it comes out. I'm doing The Outsider now. We did Castle Rock. Okay, but there hasn't really been an anchor. There hasn't been that mission statement that has existed. So I'm in the planning stages of kind of tooling around and refiddling the Stephen King cast that will keep us still firmly in the world of Stephen King, but with a different focus moving forward. So I'll leave it with that. But maybe those of you who follow me on Facebook might see where I'm going with this because I've been putting out some queries out there to help orient myself as I head into this new direction, which again is in the very earliest planning stages. So stay tuned, guys, for more updates on that. But if I go through with it, I'm pretty excited. I think that it'll be fun for all of us. Okay, guys, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to read some listener reviews on iTunes. So this is really important, guys. If you have a spare minute and you like the Stephen King cast, please head on over to iTunes and leave a review. It can really help me out. So up first, we have Mark WNH, who writes, "Let me start by saying I don't usually write a review for podcasts. There's no real reason behind it. I just don't take the 5 minutes to do so. The cast deserves a review. It's brilliant. As an avid King fan, this is the perfect companion to King's work. If you want an in-depth look into a certain book, short story, or adaptation, you've come to the right place. Thank you for your hard work in putting together an entertaining cast. Thank you, Mark NH, Mark WNH. I really appreciate it. 5 stars. And then S.H. Borup writes, best literary critique out there. 5 stars. This is the best podcast out there for all things Stephen King. Constant Reader gives thoughtful insight on some of the best horror novels around and then some. Love it. Thank you, S.H. Borup. I really appreciate it. Then we have not even an iTunes user. 5 stars. I am not an iTunes user, but I had to write a review and rate it to show this creator how much I appreciate all of his hard work. His content is by far the best King-related work I could find in all of the podcasts out there. He is very responsive when it comes to emails back and forth, and very knowledgeable about the whole Stephen King universe. Whatever your feelings are on Stephen King, I highly recommend taking a listen. Thank you, Tao to Stow W, who is not even an iTunes user. That I really appreciate that. Then we have 300-Pound Dad, who writes, love it, 5 stars. The Stephen King cast is a fun and informative show. I love finishing a Stephen King book, and then going back and listening to the corresponding episode. Thank you so much. Then we have Scooty Loop, who writes, what a wonderful surprise, 5 stars. This constant reader has provided us with a jewel in the form of a literary review of the King's great works. He does it with a thoughtful discussion and a surprising level of introspection. This podcast has heart and is so good, a must listen. Thank you, Scooty Loop. Then we have Amy Clev 77. I got a ton lately, and I'm just really appreciative of everybody. Amy Clev 77, who writes, informative and entertaining, 5 stars. I've loved Stephen King for years and years, and haven't ever found anyone to discuss and dissect his works with until I started listening to this pod. Constant Reader is informed, thoughtful, and insightful, but manages to still be fun to listen to. Thank you. Then we have Hide Bob Now, who writes, balanced and straightforward. The Stephen King cast, 5 stars, is an enjoyable analysis and explication of the body of the work of Stephen King and the various adaptations of many pieces of his work. Though an autonomous analysis, it is highly informative and simultaneously manages to be both entertaining and easy listening. Any fan of King's writings, or even his adaptations for that matter, will find the content worth their while. The value and effort into the analysis and subject matter is clearly apparent and appreciated. 5 stars from the Loblollies of East Texas. Thank you, East Texas. We have Tony Helton, who writes Stephen Kingcast review. 5 stars, a great Stephen King podcast. I started reading Stephen King when I was 15 years old, and now I'm 57. I've read and own a copy of every book. I truly enjoy listening to someone who understands the joy of spending time in his universe. And I do. Thank you, Tony, for writing in. And we have Jinker TH, who writes, really informed and entertaining. 5 stars. I discovered the podcast a few months back and have been slowly listening through the backlog as I try to read along before I listen. Very enjoyable and full of great takes on King and his many adaptations. Highly recommended. And lastly, Demon Hunter 666, who writes, fresh perspective, 5 stars. I discovered this podcast after listening to a few episodes of Coast to Coast and Monsters Among Us. I've read Stephen King books since high school and still to this day read a selection now again, and I've followed the movie adaptations. I really enjoy the insight and fresh perspective of the Stephen King cast. I'll admit I'm not a diehard fan or collector, so each time I listen, there are at least 10 new things I learn about each piece by Stephen King. Clearly, this guy puts in the work to make this all happen. What I do especially like is all the nuances and threads of connections that are observed between the different stories, especially those that connect to the Dark Tower series. So guys, any one of you, all of you that took the time to write into iTunes and leave a review, I can't thank you enough. I just hit 400 reviews and ratings, which to me is mind-boggling. In my mind, it's still 2014, and I'm thinking about putting out a podcast, let alone 5 years later and 5+ years later, and now I have listeners all over the world and 400 reviews and ratings. It's just amazing to me. So thank you so much. But if you have any time, feel free to to help me get to 500, which will be my goal for the next year. Let's get to 500. 5 years, 500 reviews in 5 years. Let's do it. I think that we can make that happen, and I can't do it without your help. So if you've just been sitting there and been thinking about doing it, please help me out. Be part of the quartet and leave me a review on iTunes. With the iTunes reviews out of the way, you know what I want to do right now? I want to do some shameless plugs. I'm going to support some Stephen King cast listeners who are also Stephen King fans and throw some names out there for all of you other Stephen King fans to, if you want to support them, I'm going to give you some options here. So up first, we have Carl Johnson, a longtime supporter of the Stephen King cast. He just published his first novel. It's entitled Invasive Species, and you can find it at Hellbound Books. Here is the synopsis. A monster has come to Maldus, Arkansas, and the residents of the small mountain town are too busy to notice. With the monster comes something even more terrifying and threatening than gnashing teeth or razor-sharp claws. The monster has brought change. The residents of the small mountain town are too busy to notice at first, busy with things such as addiction, racism, work, or land deals. Unnoticed, the change the monster brings in its insidious wake spreads like wildfire. Unnoticed, the town of Maldus falls prey to an invasive... Oh, my God, I can't speak. Unnoticed, the town of Maldus falls prey to an invasive species. That sounds great and loaded with metaphor. Up next, Gavin Castleton. If you have a spare minute, check out the music of Gavin Castleton. Gavin has written songs inspired by the world of horror, which is always a treat. He's a musician, songwriter, and producer from Portland, Oregon, best known for his diverse concept records. His album Home speaks directly to the heartbroken horror fans with its breakup album turned zombie apocalypse narrative. A Bullet, a Lever, a Key tells the story of an artist who goes corporate and abandons his creative outlet. What makes the record so impactful is that it unfolds reverse chronologically so that the consequences of his fateful life choice are revealed before the catalyst. His children's album, Travel Light, is a Little Prince-inspired allegory about religious conformity. Graceland is told from the perspective of an unhinged Staples employee who attempts to get revenge for a humiliating experience at a family wedding. Castleton's latest hip-hop micro EP, Week Until, recounts the baldness-inducing frustration of 5 consecutive unproductive meetings at a flailing startup company. In addition to releasing a dozen solo records, Castleton has recorded and performed with a wide range of acts such as The Deer Hunter, Bad Rabbits, Courtney Marie Andrews, Sage Francis. He's performed live on Jimmy Fallon, backed by one of his biggest influences, The Roots, as well as in studio for LA's legendary KCRW Morning Becomes Eclectic show. In between albums and touring, Castleton published his creative arrangements of songs by his favorite artists. His looping covers and tutorials have garnered hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube, as well as the attention of legendary artists like Seal and Peter Gabriel. I'd also like to shout out the novel 10 Mile Creek by listener Kane Macbeth, which you can find on Amazon. And here's the synopsis. After inheriting an old homestead from a relative he never knew, Ben Weiss drives his family to the woods of rural Pennsylvania to spend the summer. He soon discovers an overgrown cemetery and becomes obsessed with learning about the names engraved in stone who settled this land over 200 years ago. But the discovery of an old family secret puts his life, as well as the life of his wife and daughter, in immediate danger. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds right up our alley, doesn't it? Last but not least, you might have heard rumblings about an art house / psychedelic horror short film that expands on the possibility of George Dembro returning from the deadlights as an adult, which sounds like a blast. I recently received an email from creators Ryan Gerlich, who let me know about this project, which happened to include Tony Dakota and Ben Heller, who played Georgie and Stan in the 1990 It TV series. Once I have more info, I'll let you all know, but I wanted to start to get the word around about it. And not only is that movie out in circulation, and I'm sure you could find it, but they're also, and I've definitely heard about this one, they're working on a documentary about Pennywise and the pop cultural significance of Pennywise. So we have legit King fans out there doing legit King work. And I, at some point, probably will have them on the show. So stay tuned for that. And as always, if you like clothing and like to walk around with clothes on, then I strongly recommend heading over to Katet 19 to get all of your Stephen King related t-shirts. They are comfortable, they're stylish. Matt just released some new prints inspired by Salem's Lot. You can get a Father Callahan baseball tee. You can get a Salem's Lot baseball, like, sports logo t-shirt. It's just really good stuff. I have an entire bureau just full of Stephen King t-shirts, and you can just walk down the street with a cool Stephen King t-shirt that is so subtle that most people aren't going to recognize, and it's a great calling card for other Stephen King fans who are going to fans that are going to see it and recognize it for what it is, and then you know that you're in the club. So Katet 19, guys, make sure that you check it out. And now it is time to talk about The Outsider. Guys, I'm so excited about this. Okay, The Outsider, which you can find on HBO, HBO Now, HBO Go. It made me realize that King adaptations, they've given us, iconic top shelf horror such as The Shining, Carrie, Misery. It's given us, King adaptations have given us names, pop cultural names for everyday familiarity. Example, okay, there's a mean dog on your street. Okay, what are you going to call it? What are you going to refer to it as? Chances are you might refer to it as Cujo. There's a car over there, that is a little bit creepy, or maybe it drives too fast. It's just Christine, right? Yes, clowns have existed in pop culture, the evil clown, but really Stephen King put his stamp on it and firmly impressed it upon modern pop culture audiences. He's given us some of the most feel-good movies ever made, and that's not something that he's really celebrated for. It's acknowledged, but almost dismissively. But Shawshank Redemption is considered the most popular movie of all time. Think about that. It's the most popular movie of all time. The Green Mile is beloved. Stand By Me. So he's done a lot with his written works, and his adaptation have given us a wide array of just different types of adaptations. And of course, there's been the schlock as well, which there's something to be said about it. But this is interesting because The Outsider is different. And with The Outsider, we get something we've never gotten before from Stephen King. This is Stephen King doing prestige television drama. Now, we've had Stephen King TV miniseries, we've had Stephen King series before, and that's all been fine and good, but it hasn't had the sheen or the talent or the shine of just golden age of television, of this pristine prestige drama. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about shows that we tend to think of as the best of the best, which is Breaking Bad, Sopranos, True Detective, so we are getting that here with The Outsider. We have it presented to us by Richard Price. Who gave us most recently The Night Of. Again, another HBO show, and I'll be talking about this because it feels very similar in some ways to The Night Of. But he was a writer on The Wire, and he brings with it that rich procedural element without it being that stylized fake but fun Law and Order. Nothing against Law and Order. Law and Order is really good at what it is, but it has this real lived-in, beaten-down, worn-in familiarity of precincts and courthouses and the way that people within the system speak to one another. That is very apparent here. And Jason Bateman, I'm going to get to this later, Jason Bateman has hit a new level with The Outsider. who has been in our pop culture since the Hogan family, later becoming All in the Family. No, not All in the Family. Valerie's Family, then the Hogan family, and then of course early 2000s brought. Well, he was Teen Wolf too. Then early 2000s brought us the return of Jason Bateman with Arrested Development. He's been working consistently, but then with Ozark, he really took a dramatic turn. And started working behind the camera, which led to him winning the Emmy this past year. And he was up against some massive contenders, including was it Miguel Sapochnik? Is that who it was from Game of Thrones? He was up against some Game of Thrones vets, and he won. And you can watch the reaction. He looks surprised. But now after, and I like Ozark, but now after watching The Outsider, you can see how deserving he is of that Emmy, and I like that we're entering this new phase of Jason Bateman, which is just this guy's firing on all cylinders in every aspect of the job, whether it be in front of the camera or behind the camera. And the creative force of Richard Price and Jason Bateman and Stephen King has resulted with an incredibly gripping, fascinating adaptation of one of Stephen King's best novels, period, let alone one of the better novels in his more recent works, The Outsider. I'm really enamored with it. We have 8 episodes left to go, but knowing where the twists and turns are going to be coming within the first 2 hours, I was sitting there completely captivated, impressed, immersed in this world. There is really just a different level of quality that is occurring within the 60 minutes of each of these episodes that I look forward to getting into in detail for the remainder of this podcast episode. And I'm excited to talk about it because I feel that maybe on some recent episodes of the Stephen King cast, I haven't been as complimentary towards the subject matter. Pet Sematary, and I'll be talking about Pet Sematary in a little bit, the recent Pet Sematary, and the Institute, but with Doctor Sleep and this, I'm very happy that I just get to bask in the things that I like about a good work of Stephen King. Okay, so let's just kind of go through the beat by beat before I get into the larger themes here. So like right away, when it begins in the pre-credits, let's just say the pre-credits, we get these overhead shots, these just really masterful overhead shots that make us all look like ants. And this really goes to show that the outsider could be anywhere. All right, it's just a macro view of the world through which the outsider is able to walk through and spread his reign of misery and terror. We, aside from this visual, it's also accompanied with an audio of this peaceful piano, which is soon going to be juxtaposed against the gruesome discovery of the body. But what's on top of that juxtaposition and that jarring tonal clash of peace and absolute horror, this also links to Dead Children. It's the music that was listened to by Ralph's deceased son, and it's played during the discovery of another dead child. So it links the 2 dead children together to Ralph, which just goes to show how personally he is taking this. As it's moving overhead, the camera catches the dog walker, and we follow the dog walker, which then leads to the van, which then follows the blood. It is a nice progression of tracking. And we're less than a minute in. There is so much that is going on. And again, it just really goes to show the detail that Bateman has as a creative force behind the camera. This peaceful music, like I said, is soon juxtaposed against the discovery of the body. And this is where we meet our main characters here. We meet Ralph, we meet Tamika, we meet Eunice Sablo. The faces of the force and the law and the order that will soon wrap themselves around this crime that will then lead itself to Terry. But meeting Ralph, our protagonist, our flawed protagonist, we see him as a good man, who arrives and quickly takes charge. Even though we see his reaction to the discovery of the body, and he stares at it, and he doesn't have a wild reaction, but you can tell that what he is seeing, it's triggering something within him, even if it's taking place behind his stone face. It's a child. It's no doubt invoking the death of his own child, though they died, like his wife says, in different fashion. It's still the forceful removal of potential from this world. And then, in what I find to be an incredibly powerful moment that leads to the credits, Ralph is talking to Eunice and asks if the teeth marks are from an animal. The answer is no. Ralph hangs his head, cuts to credits. Boom. This is The Outsider. I'm all in on the Outsider. It just captures the reality of this world, the heaviness of this world, the stakes of this world. You understand the passion that Ralph is going to have in the reasons why he is so charged against Terry, and why he wants to take Terry down, and why he is vindicated in bending the rules to make a show which ultimately will bring about the destruction of Terry and hang like an albatross of guilt around his neck. All of that is just so, it is set up so perfectly in this quick opening right before the credits. And then we have the lead up to the arrest of Ralph interviewing the man with the dog, and then our introduction to Terry. And I'm going to be getting to that in detail in my final thoughts of the episode, but I really want to celebrate the introduction to Terry and the Maitland family. Like I said, we get a little bit more detail on Ralph as he is just taking a moment of, I don't know if I want to call it peace of, or whatever it is, reflection, of just being in his son's room before he goes out to arrest Terry. And then it's time for him to make his way to the baseball field. The music cuts in. It's a ticking sound, and it's creating anxiety. Ralph gets the warrant signed. He heads to the car. It's cutting back to previous moments leading up to the arrest of Terry. And this does two things. It shows the overwhelming evidence against Terry, but it also shows the meticulous investigative procedural style of Ralph. It shows that he is a good detective, and he has a real lived-in sense of a detective life. And even though this is a Stephen King story, watching it play out really does feel like a detective/police show. And I can tell, and I understand why this is getting as much attention as it is, and why Richard Price is getting a lot of the credit here. Because those that might be unfamiliar with the book are seeing this. And they're listening to the dialogue, which again I'm going to get to, and they're going to see the way the mystery is presented, and the clues, and all the evidence. And a lot of reviews are saying are heaping that praise at Richard Price, which he's adapting it. He's doing a great job. But this is a very, very honest adaptation so far of Stephen King's novel. The way this is playing out, a lot of the dialogue beats, the character interactions, they are plucked from Stephen King. Stephen King does like detective books. He does like crime fiction. He has been tinkering and playing within this genre. As I have said before, he started getting into this. You can see the prototype here in A Good Marriage, and then he really started to fine-tune the skills in the Mercedes trilogy, and then here we have The Outsider, where he really says, here is what I can do. I can really show you what it would be like if one of my stories took place, except it's going to be through the lens of a detective and the forces of the law, rather than your everyman, but people that are dedicated to law and order in a logical world, all of a sudden being faced with the illogical, unnameable, undefined horror that has permeated my works. What happens then when people that build truth out of evidence to point the way, when that truth fails them? What happens next? That is Stephen King. Richard Price is doing a phenomenal job in making it come to life, but I just want to acknowledge that this is so far a very truthful and authentic and faithful adaptation of the of Stephen King's book, and I want credit to go where credit is due. So then we have, just heartbreaking moments. The Mrs. Peterson's reaction to the news of her son's death. We have each of the different witnesses as they speak to Ralph. The school teacher puts Terry in the van talking to Frankie. We have that little girl putting Terry coming out of the woods covered in blood. And that is such a terrifying moment because of just, we saw what happened to the little boy's body. So the vulnerability of the girl is pronounced in that moment. The second he takes a step from behind the van towards her, even though she is telling the story in the present, that's the level of danger that Jason Bateman is able to create, both as an actor and as the director of the scene. That even though we know that she's telling the story, that simple step from behind the van places this monster coming closer to her. And just the blank nature of his conversation, and the flat affect of it. When he gets in the van and drives and kind of backs up and stares at her and then waves, it's disorienting because it's so strange. It's not what we expect. We expect the Pennywise reaction, right? The monster to go lurching after her, with his mouth open wide and those classic Stephen King sharp teeth, to like, bite her arm off. But that doesn't happen. He's very calm. He's talking to her, as naturally as he can. He's being patient. He's lingering longer than he should so she can get a good look at him. He's giving a weak excuse for the blood on his face. It's all so strange and surreal in its own way and incredibly effective. That's where we first meet Claude and Terry in the strip club, which leads to the conversation with the cab driver who picks up Terry, who asks or who says that she's going to need to call in the cab to the dispatcher. Then we have Ralph looking at the surveillance footage, and what I like about this is that it just looks real. There's no fancy, stupid technology. It's grainy. You just hear the mouse clicks. It's just Ben Mendelsohn looking at the camera. It's very boring. It's very tedious. It's very real, and I appreciated that. And then the arrest happens. And we have Terry, in the dugout, and, we first see the police as shadows coming in from the background, and then Glory stands up as she realizes that something is happening, and just Terry just trying to talk to them, like, he knows them, and he's just trying to talk to them, and he doesn't realize what's happening, but realizes enough to comply, and he stays calm. And it just shows that he's just it's not that he's a good man, because he is. And I'm going to get into the ways in which the show goes out of its way to very subtly indicate that he is genuinely good. But it shows the rationality and the logic. And you know what? It shows that he is a member of the white. That all-encompassing Stephen King force that represents good. There's a moral compass within Terry that knows immediately to just lock in step with law and order, even when he doesn't understand what's occurring. The police are asking him to come. He is going to come. They ask him if he understands. he's not going to fight it right now, he says yes. There's something to be said about that. And then instinctively, he knows his process. He knows what needs to get done. It shows that he is thoughtful and forward thinking. He's not panicking. He tells Glory to call Howie, which gives us the introduction to Howie, which I didn't know. I didn't know it was going to be Bill Camp. And for those of you who don't know who Bill Camp, he's a character actor. And I mentioned The Night of. And he was the chief detective, or the primary detective in The Night of, and he was fantastic in that. Again, he has a real lived-in, authentic, real-world feel to him. And then we just see how quickly he takes charge, shows how quickly he can think, and we think that the Maitlands are in good hands here with someone so quick thinking and take charge. And there's a moment here when Terry is in the car with Ralph and the detectives, when they're starting to needle him, and you see Terry's innocence. And if you see things, and if you know where this is going, and you know the conclusion of the story, and you know of Terry's innocence, and if you see it through this perspective, and you're not trying to suss out whether or not Terry is guilty, and you just know him to be innocent, his righteousness, or not even his righteousness, but his hurt when Ralph asks, if he ever touched, his son. How dare you ask me that? And then we get a follow-up to that in episode 2, phenomenally. To know the DA and how eager he is, how hungry he is to climb up that ladder. And this is where the decisions are made by the police and the DA, where everything is discussed. So to be rushed and theatrical, which, like I said, are going to place later events around their shoulders. And then after this, we see the Terry side of the story, quiet moments of the funeral, and it's smart to focus on the brother as much as they do. We never see a massive outpouring of reaction. It's in fact it's bottled up. It's a noticeable lack of reaction. He's always in silence. There's no opportunity for him to express remorse. Sound has been taken away from him. Like I said, it's complete silence. It's the absence of any sort of reaction, of any sort of sensory interaction with the world, or his emotions, or his feelings. He's been cut off, and all of that speaks to this restrained and contained emotion and reaction. And the one time we will see him react, it will be massively consequential. And I think that it was, again, a brilliant choice to present it in this way, to deprive him of any reaction to the death of his brother, and then later the death of his mother. And when his mother dies, he's left alone by his father. The doctor is the one that is there to console him. And then we get the Night of Part 2, which is Terry in prison and the dangers of prison. And we see just how vulnerable he is. And then we have Mrs. Peterson's reaction at the dinner table. I kind of got ahead of myself earlier, and which leads to her heart attack. Again, all quiet. It's all quiet. It is all happening in a vacuum of grief. And then there's the end. Okay, as we head towards the conclusion of this episode, supernatural elements start to become introduced as Terry and Glory's daughter sees someone in her bedroom, and that will never not be scary. Watching a child react to something that you cannot see. Every now and then my daughter will say something, and I'll, that just scares the shit out of me. And it's something, it's nothing. Like she woke up, when she was younger. She used to say stuff like, "I don't like it when the ghosts pick me up." I obviously, I don't blame her for not liking that. I didn't like hearing it. And it was just her, I'm sure, like had a dream one night. Or, like if, your kid is like kind of like looking into a corner or staring off in the distance. It's like, what does she see that I don't see? So it's when a child reacts to something that you don't see, that will always be terrifying. That happens here. Then at this point we have the private investigator fighting the footage of Terry at the conference, and at this point, it's the game of law where both sides are compiling all of their evidence, and at this point, what was a mystery before becomes increasingly strange. And then ultimately, the moment that stands out for me here before the episode truly concludes is Glory laying out his clothes for the upcoming pre-trial with the judge. Knowing where the story is going to go, it really feels like she's picking out clothes for a funeral. I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary and then get to my thoughts. So from Wikipedia, Ralph and Terry meet at the prison where Terry is held. And in light of evidence in favor of Terry's innocence, Ralph expresses uncertainty about his initial decision to have Terry arrested. The next day, Joy Peterson dies at the hospital. As Terry arrives at the courthouse for his arraignment, Ollie Peterson opens fire, fatally wounding him before being killed by Ralph. With his dying breath, Terry insists on his innocence. The deformed man is shown at the courthouse watching the aftermath of the shooting. Fred Peterson, Frank and Ollie's father, is left the sole surviving member of the family. He promptly attempts suicide by hanging, leaving him comatose. In light of the shooting, Ralph is put on administrative leave, and a hot-headed detective, Jack Hoskins, is called to fill in for him. The case continues to gnaw at Ralph, who investigates the van used by the killer and identifies that it was in the same location as the Maitland family during their trip to Terry's father earlier that year. While questioning a reluctant Glory about that trip, Ralph learns from her daughter Maya that Terry got a small cut on his wrist, supposedly from a male nurse at his father's nursing home. A farmhand discovers a pile of newly discarded clothes in a barn, matching the outfit Terry was seemingly seen wearing on security footage after the murder. So here are my thoughts. I'll kind of break it into chunks. So the prison meeting in the beginning. So I already mentioned earlier Jason Bateman and winning the Emmy for directing this past year, but how can you not believe Bateman's performance during this scene? The monologue that he gives about teaching Ralph's son how to bunt, it's clearly going to be submitted for an Emmy, and it should be submitted for an Emmy, and if he wins that Emmy, it would be well-deserved. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance that is raw and also restrained at the same time, full of emotion, full of pathos, wonderfully delivered in just with the Jason Bateman charm and likability, and your heart breaks for him in this moment because at this point you believe that he is innocent, and you believe him when he says that he is innocent. But that is just a home run of a speech. And then we have the walk to the courthouse, and the sad part here is that the characters expect that Terry's going to get out of this. The judge will throw it out because of the fingerprints and the author panel footage. So the fact that he doesn't get to walk out of the courthouse as a free man, it's just tragic. The potency of this scene, the way in which Bateman directs it, it is superb. You get the sense of just the media circus and how it's barely being held together as he's making his way, and how anything can go wrong. And the shots fired, the scene takes place, and then it's replayed, it's slowed down, and you feel each gunshot. I mean, when Tamika gets shot, you gasp. The pregnant woman is her baby okay? It happens so fast. Even when it's slow, it happens so fast. And that's it. That's a big, big moment. Terry dies. And that is shocking. We live in a post-Game of Thrones world, so that shock value has diminished somewhat. On some level, we all, expect a Ned Stark, to be introduced and then die. So, but still, it doesn't take away from the tragedy of this story. And I remember reading the book, how shocked I was. And I think it must have been shocking I'm not surprised if it would be shocking for audiences. Jason Bateman, he's a star. Why wouldn't we expect this to be the story of him declaring his innocence, proving himself, and then fighting the evil that framed him, right? But no, we don't get that. It gets reframed here as the story of the man who rushed to judgment and now has to avenge the honor and the memory of the man who died because of his actions. It gets turned on its head. Then the aftermath of everything, we have Mr. Peterson hanging himself, which is so sad. All of this is sad, and that's done so well with the ticking clock and the frames jumping as the runner is jogging along the street, and it's the body swings through the window at the exact ticking of the clock. It's just framed and just delivered so well, and small little details like the doctor trying to find someone to sign off of him because there's no one. There's no one. There's an emptiness to this world now. And it just speaks to the loneliness here that the only world he had is just gone. Completely gone. It's so sad. Ralph is living with the guilt of such a colossal fuck up here. It's his burden to bear, but it also shows that he's a good man who wants to make it right. And his quiet self-punishment is juxtaposed with the introduction of Jack, the detective who comes to fill in for him, who lashes out at others. Whether it be the boar he kills just to kill because he's mad that his trip got cut early, or the strip club patron who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then we have the DA resigning while discussing Roanoke and disappearing fighter jets, which is haunting in its own right when you have someone that is the semblance of reality in the sense of law and order and logic, and someone that's supposed to build truth up from pieces of evidence and prove reality, who now cannot explain it. There is an existential horror in his admittance that some things you cannot prove. That pieces do not make up a puzzle that our minds can rationalize. That there are holes in reality. That's haunting. And then Ralph is just desperately trying to make sense of this, despite what the DA says. Ralph needs to prove that Terry now was innocent. He needs to make sense of this for his own sake, for the memory of Terry, to ease his own guilt, for all of the above. He needs to make sense of this, and him getting zeroing on Ohio and chasing the van and just doing what he can, and even recognizing that something as small as a cut can be significant. And this is what I like about it. Think about all of just the tiny cuts that you get throughout your life when you scrape against the edge of a table, or you scrape your shin, or you're doing leaves and a branch just kind of scrapes your skin. You walk around with minute cuts here and there all the time. And how many of them throughout your life do you remember? You don't, because it's a part of life. And so to zero in on something as insignificant as just a tiny cut just really goes to show to the meticulous nature of Ralph, and how willing he is to go to prove that Terry now did not do this. And then the episode concludes on another supernatural note with the clothes in a barn covered in goo, and there's a danger there that Bateman is able to capture. We don't see anything other than the clothes, but we also see a lot of hay bales and corners, and there's the attic, and there's a lot of spaces in there where someone could be hiding. And there's a danger of the farmer being in there in that moment, in the uncertainty of where these clothes came from, and the fact that space was violated by someone who left these clothes behind, that someone entered this world of safety and left something behind. We don't know what that is yet. this farmer doesn't know the significance of these clothes. But that world has now been tainted by this outsider. I want to wrap things up. I want to talk about my final thoughts. I've mentioned this before. Immediately, this show nailed the authenticity of this world. And I try not to lift something up by putting something down, but I find this is a perfect example to illustrate my point that I made in the Pet Sematary review of the 2019 movie this past year. I was very frustrated with the final product of that movie because the content is the death of a child, the death of family, the death of hope, of potential, all of that. It is of the bleakest stories that Stephen King has ever written, and it's supposed to just be pure horror on a fundamental level. And so in order to do that, you need to really sell the family and make it feel real and make it painful. And that just didn't happen in Pet Sematary for me, because it didn't have that lived-in quality of a recreation of a reality, of the that hidden secret language that a family has, built of routines and habits and shared memories and inside jokes, and the language that a family creates within its own unit, and the familiar patterns that we all have with one another when we share space. None of that was present. The atmosphere that a family creates, and what a family is, it's the air that builds up from the love that you share, that's built on those relationships, that fills the spaces that make up the house that you're living in. That needs to be present. That was not there in Pet Sematary. It was full of just your basic, oh, can you believe that we're living in this house now? Wow, that's amazing. I can't, when we traveled all the way up here, like, I didn't know it was going to be like this. And then, conversations like, well, tomorrow's going to be a big day, so you got to get to sleep now. Good night, I love you. I love you too. It was just, it's your rote, basic conversations that just felt inauthentic. That's not present here in I almost said The Night Of, in The Outsider. Immediately upon meeting Terry and his family in the kitchen, he's making magic pancakes. They're asking him why he didn't use the right color dye. He has to explain himself. He's talking just like on a tangent, like, isn't it strange how these two colors make purple? Like, it's not necessary, but real dialogue isn't necessary. And it speaks to like a real quality of a real family. And then, he starts talking like about his baseball game. It's delivering exposition, but he just wants his kids to be excited for him. That feels real. And the kids start talking about God and asking like a legit question. If two teams pray to God that, each team wins, who's God going to root for? Great philosophical question that two young kids should be asking. And then, the dad cracks a joke. The mom's not having it. She doesn't want her kids asking critical questions about God at this point. And all of this is communicating the lives of each of them, and how Terry immediately defers to Glory, and all of this just, it was so quick. It was so quick, but it spoke volumes about them as a family, and it just spoke volumes about the care that went into building that scene and the reality of this world and the people that live within it. And even though it might not be your family, it's recognizable on some level because it felt truthful due to the care and detail and attention that went into small moments of a dad making pancakes for his kids before he goes out to a baseball game. And in that moment, he's making jokes, they're talking about God, they're showing their values. There was a lot packed in to a small amount of space and a small amount of time that was more truthful to life and family than the entirety of 2 hours that I saw in Pet Sematary. And then also little things. And I just really want to just take these moments to just share just moments that spoke to me about the authenticity here. Tamika immediately filling Ralph in about the body. When we first meet Ralph. Ralph seeing the man with the dog, asking if that's the guy who discovered it. And then just a quick comment that he shouldn't be here. It's just a fine little detail. It doesn't mean anything. It didn't have to be there. It shows, a very naturalistic and distinct flair of dialogue. Ralph asking Eunice if the teeth marks were from an animal. The answer is no. Ralph hangs his head. There's no damn it. There's no screaming at the sky. It's just quiet. It's defeating. Ralph in that moment is defeated. Little things like Ralph asking the dog walker, did you touch the body for any reason? Just to see if he was still alive. Pause. Still alive? Great moments of dialogue. And something that struck me, they all dress like normal people. This is not super stylized fashion. All the guys are dressed like dads. All right? They're wearing polos. Like kind of ill-fitting polos that aren't incredibly flattering. They're wearing jeans that are not in style with just functional sneakers that they got probably on discount. They are not stylish people. They don't have to be, but they feel real, and I really appreciated that. And of course, there's the direction of the show. I mean, it's just beautifully done. I mean, like I mentioned, the overhead shot that started it. But another thing that's great, thematically speaking, is we have a lot of voyeuristic shots where the camera is positioned outside of a room looking in. We position in hallways looking into a room and then panning in. It gives the perspective of someone on the outside looking in. Very, very smart. Jason Bateman is absolutely killing it. I already mentioned the Jason Bateman's bunting speech. But, okay, let me actually just think about this. Is Jason Bateman the quintessential or apotheosis of Stephen King protagonists? Isn't this the role that he was meant to play? Can't you, if this was 1994, 1995, 96, can't you see him taking the role that Steven Weber would have played as Jack Torrance? Can't you see him taking the role Tim Daly played in Storm of the Century? So it feels that, but there is such a, going back to authentic, there was just, he is playing a character that is very much true to who he is, it seems, as a person, and just seems so honest. It's great. I'm glad that he was in this. When he said, "You ruined our lives," it was so quiet, so potent, so powerful. And there's small moments that just show, that are there to show the audience that Terry is a good guy. The girl who saw him bloody instinctively thought that he was fighting a bad guy and got hurt. And then he takes a more talented player off the field to let a smaller, more inclined to strike out player have a turn. He plays fair. There's moments that signal that he is a good guy. And in upcoming episodes, I'm sure I will talk more about Ben Mendelsohn. This is the fantastic role for Ben Mendelsohn. I'll talk about it more. But like I said, I'm going to wrap up this episode now. But guys, make a long story short, I love it. It's great. I'm very glad it's here. It's been living up to my expectations. I was really looking forward to this. And I look forward to the following 8 weeks where I will review this episode. All right, guys, you can write to me at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. Please leave a iTunes review. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I've been doing a lot of work on Facebook lately, really interacting with people, throwing out a lot of cool questions and having some good conversations. So follow me over there, and I'll talk to you then. Okay, guys, so I'll see you here next week. And may you have long days and pleasant nights. And I'll see you here for episode 3 of The Outsider, where MON spells Stephen King Cast.